Hello, I'm Peter German, co-chair of the Dane County chapter of Our Wisconsin Revolution. Today we'll be interviewing Maresh, a candidate for Assembly in the 76th District. Awesome. Ashley, you want to go next?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not on camera today, folks. My name is Ashley Hudson. I'm the Southwest Regional Organizer for Our Wisconsin Revolution, and I'm assisting Peter German today with interviewing Allison. We'll just kind of be going back and forth with the questions, and I'm excited to do this. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Allie. If you want to, you can quick introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for having me. So my name is Allie Marsh, and I am running, just to give you the 30-second introduction, my top priority in running for office is to improve the mental health of our residents. This issue is very personal to me. I've lived with anxiety and depression since I was a teenager and know that I'm not alone. A little bit of background. Most recently, I was working with the state of Wisconsin on mental health initiatives. And what I learned during that process and working for the state is really what drove me to run for office and to also specifically address the political gridlock within the state capitol. So really excited to talk about these issues and talk about how we can improve the emotional well-being of our residents, which means improving a whole lot. And you touched on that on your list that I got before. So again, really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you again. Just to jump right in. So number one, do you support publicly funded elections, and then why not?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. And like many Wisconsinites, was frustrated when Wisconsin stopped funding our elections in 2011. We were one of the first states to do this. And so would like to see that happen again. I mean, anything that can make running for office, and as a first-time candidate, I understand the need for more equity within this system. So if there's a way to make it more equitable, to take big money out of politics, I'm fully on board. Another thing I want to also mention with just creating more fair election, I'm also in support of ranked choice voting as well. And believe that's another avenue as well that we can focus on. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you. So the next question is, do you favor extending the time frame to vote at the polls during elections to a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the election date?
Yes, this is another really good point, right, of making voting as accessible as possible. You know, we know that given how it's currently arranged, that this leaves far too many people out. So any opportunity to remove barriers to getting to the polls or to making voting by mail more accessible as well, I'm fully supportive of. So this type of initiative that you laid out with the 2 weeks beforehand, I think would just give people so much more opportunity to have their voice heard. So absolutely, anything we can do to increase voting rights.
Great, thank you.
And then sort of while we're on the topic of voting rights, obviously gerrymandering has been a major thing in Wisconsin, especially in the Assembly. So given that, what model or plan would you prefer for legislative redistricting?
Right. So the model that I would fight for and advocate for is the Iowa model, where we have, I mean, just to get right down to it, I don't believe that legislators should be drawing the maps, period. I mean, we, even as a legislator, we have no role in that. I believe it should be a separate, nonpartisan entity that draws the maps, presents it to the legislature, and we vote on it, and then try to come to an agreement in that way. So, you know, this is of course time sensitive given the census, the recent census. So we need to really advocate for this and need this advocacy from both sides of the aisle as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, so the next question. So what are your top three, or no, what are your top three legislative priorities? What will you do to move them through the legislature?
Sure. So one, we have to address, you know, we're living in the midst of a public health crisis, an economic crisis, a racial justice crisis, which we have for decades and centuries, but we need to address all of these things immediately. So my top 3 priorities, like I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm running to improve the mental health of our residents. I believe we are in a period where all families are going to be under some type of emotional stress. And we need to prioritize access to mental health care, access to healthcare more broadly. And so that is something I'd certainly advocate for. Wisconsin has a huge mental health provider shortage, and especially among our access to children and adolescents. And so would really, really advocate for increasing access to mental health care. Second would be increasing, and this is not in any type of order of one's more important than the other. I believe they're all of equal importance. Second would be ensuring people have the financial security that they need to have their basic needs met, to put food on the table, to have a house, a roof over their heads. And so that means, and I believe this is going to lead into the next question about providing, a financial, some type of financial payment to residents who are struggling right now due to the current crisis. Also ensuring that our unemployment benefits continue, making sure that they're streamlined so there's not a backlog. And then the third legislative priority is we have to address systemic racism. I've outlined a plan on my website, but this, which of course includes huge changes to policing reform, which I know we'll also talk about in a little bit, but also looking at all the different areas within our lives that there is true inequality. And unfortunately, that's a lot of places. That means we have to address, housing inequality, income inequality, education quality and the achievement gap, healthcare access, right? We're seeing that just devastating numbers come out from the COVID-19 crisis, and that it's impacting communities of color at such alarming rates, and we just cannot stand for this. And I think Wisconsin, we have to just really address this head on. So then going to the last question of, well, how would I do that as a legislator? I do think this is one of the areas that sets me apart from my opponents. One thing that I mentioned early on is addressing the political gridlock. I really do want to be a different type of legislator in the state capitol, of one that can work with the other side. I want to reiterate or state that, I am a strong Democrat and a progressive Democrat, but understand that at this point, the assembly, I don't think we're going to have a majority anytime soon. So we need to figure out a way to work with the other side to get legislation passed. And so to do that on day one, a lot of people will ask, well, what is your plan on day one of starting the job? My plan would be to meet with every single legislator and start developing those relationships, start trying to figure out a way to work together during this time. I worked under both the Republican administration and Democratic administration when I was with the state government. So believe that because of this experience, I can really find a way to work across the aisle, which we need to do. We need to find a way to do it.
Awesome. So in the emergence, you mentioned this question a little bit before, but in the emergence from this pandemic, would you support a state level economic hardship payment? Would you support that payment going directly to residents? And then describe your top components that you believe should be in such a bill.
Right. So like I said before, I would support a payment like this and a direct payment to residents. As far as the components of it, to be honest, one, I would really actually want to take a little bit more time to think of the 5 components that would be in legislation like this. So happy to get back to you guys about that. That is my approach to legislating, is to try to be as detail oriented as possible and thorough. So I don't want to just, do this on the fly. But one thing that I would certainly make sure that is in this type of legislation is however it's working, however it's laid out, is to remove the barriers, right? A lot of times when you have this type of government assistance, there's a lot of barriers to access, and it's very difficult for residents to just navigate the systems. So that's something that I would definitely fight for, to make it a more seamless process to get this payment, because people need it immediately. And we really need to figure out a way to do that in a streamlined way. So again, happy to follow up with more details though after this. But the other thing I wanted to mention on this question, because I think it brings up a broader policy initiative that we need to consider down the line. Given the current economic crisis that we're in and the loss of jobs that we're seeing, we always knew that there were, was going to be a loss of jobs just in general moving forward in our economy due to the rise in artificial intelligence and automation. And I do believe, and you're seeing this out of news articles, that at some point we're going to have to start discussing universal basic income. I think that that is one thing that I've publicly stated, is of looking at some type of UBI in the future, of starting to testing and piloting this to ensure people's basic needs are met, and that we are all, again, have those needs met so that we can thrive here. So I think this is a really excellent point, and also drives into longer term solutions that we're gonna have to talk about it eventually.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So the next question. How will you guarantee housing to citizens? How will you deal with the financial situation of those facing eviction because of the pandemic? And what specific solutions would you propose?
I mean, the first one is extending the moratorium on evictions. Well, not extending, actually, now reestablishing. So, the governor was able to execute that, or implement that emergency order, so people were not evicted from their homes during this pandemic. We are still in the midst of this crisis. I was really disappointed to see that people can now be evicted from their homes, and they are. One of the earlier articles showed immediately 1,300 folks being requested to be evicted from their homes, and we can't just have that going on right now. No one should be. It's especially due to the public health crisis. This puts people's health at risk. And that's why at least one area that I would really advocate for, to ensure that people have stable housing during this time, and period for that matter, is to invest further in the Wisconsin Rental Assistance Program, and really make sure that people are taken care of, and we do not have evictions going on right now.
Thank you. In a sort of a similar thread as flaws in our system exposed by COVID, will you fight for a single-payer healthcare system at the state level, and would you support a federal single-payer healthcare system?
Absolutely. I would fully support Medicare for all at the federal level. On the state level, I would also further or completely advocate for a single payer system at the Wisconsin level. Now, the only thing that I have to say about that is, well, what we know how hard that would be to accomplish in this moment in time with the current makeup of the state legislature. So what I would immediately advocate for, and where I do think and believe that we could have some progress, is to immediately expand Medicaid. We've got to do that so more people have access to healthcare in Wisconsin. But then longer term, absolutely looking at some type of public health care option, making Badger Care Plus a public option for Wisconsin residents. That has been proposed before, and I would advocate for that again. And to really, again, we just have to make healthcare more accessible. Period. That we've got to do that, and we're seeing why the importance of that is just being highlighted right now. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So yeah, so the next question is, will you pass workers' rights laws helping those who are forced to return to work but who risk infection from COVID-19? absent the equivalent of a single-payer system, will you push the state to guarantee medical coverage through voucher care for those affected this way? And I guess you did kind of answer that to some degree, but yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, I should just warn you guys, I'm going to just be saying yes to all your questions here. This is, no, of course. I mean, I think for the individuals who are going back to work, who are on the front line, you know, we have to care for our residents, you know, and especially those, you know, many of us are in a privileged position to work from home, and but for those who are, you know, working in the hospitals, driving the buses, you know, all of these critical essential workers, we need to make sure, or trying to have their businesses survive right now, you know, we need to make sure that there's adequate health care for them, and that they don't have to worry about the medical bill because of this pandemic right now. So so yes, to answer that question again, just gonna keep sounding repetitive here.
Thank you.
I hope that's a good thing.
All right, so number 9. This one's actually a little bit more of like a sort of a lightning round. We'll just sort of ask you, you know, if you support some an individual policy, and then you can do a yes or no. And if you want to like expound upon it a little bit, you can. But yeah. Right. So do you support the propositions outlined in Campaign 0, which includes ending broken windows policing?
Yes. Yeah.
More community oversight?
Yes.
Limiting use of force?
Yes.
Independent investigation and prosecution of officers?
Yes.
Community representation within those investigations?
Yes.
More body cam / filming the police?
Yes.
Increased amounts of training for officers?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Putting an end to for-profit policing?
Yes.
And then finally, demilitarization of the police force?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes. Ashley's just going to step out for a second, so I'll handle the next one as well.
Great.
Awesome. So in addition, yeah, please respond to following. So this is more of like a, you know, to sort of indicate what you believe should be done with funding for the police. Do you believe it should be increased, leveled, decreased, or eliminated?
I would say what I believe we should be doing with the police departments and funding for the law enforcement is to decrease and reinvest in social services. So, you know, again, you know, one area where I would love to see is that we reallocate these funds for mental health providers, you know, social workers, to make sure that, because I believe at the end of the day that is more effective long-term. And so that's certainly how I would answer that question.
Thank you. So next one's a little bit intense, but you know, hypothetically, let's say a police officer in your jurisdiction has been filmed killing someone that they've stopped arrested. What would be your response?
You know, as a state legislator, what I would advocate for in that situation is to advocate for the victim's rights in providing an independent investigation. And so pushing our Department of Justice to do that. And then, you know, and then working with city officials in whatever capacity I can as an advocate, you know, so to do what I can certainly within the state legislature with the agencies that we work with, and then also just voice public support as well, to make sure that, you know, again, we fight for justice in those situations, and so would definitely approach it that way.
Thank you. And then if you have any other propositions regarding policing you'd like to speak about that we haven't covered, now would be the time if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing I just want to add is that I'm in full support of what Governor Evers and Lieutenant Barnes had pushed forward with their policing reform package, with which, talks about the no knock warrants, or puts into place no knock warrants. And, again, like you had already mentioned this and Campaign Zero really does cover most of the other things too, especially the training for police officers, implicit bias training, de-escalation training, and again, regarding policing, I just want to reemphasize I would really, really advocate for more funding, especially at the state level, of when we're looking at how all of the money is distributed, is to see more of it go from Department of Justice, Department of Corrections, and move into more of Department of Children and Families, Department of Health Services, Department of Public Instruction. That list could go on and on, but more to the social services. And so would really approach policing that way. That's what I'd just like to add to that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So next question, kind of switching gears a little bit. Who did you support in the Democratic primary this year and why? And then the second part of that question is, when did you start publicly supporting them?
Sure. So I know, and Peter, I know the sign in your background. I know I don't want to get in too much trouble for this answer. So I'm going to try to explain myself to the best of my abilities. So one, let me just state that I fully support all of Bernie Sanders' initiatives. And I believe in what he is fighting for and what your organization is fighting for. But I did not end up supporting him in the primary election. And I've voiced that non-support for quite some time. And I've always actually been supportive of Biden as the nominee. And here's why. When it was Biden versus Bernie, and happy to give you guys my rationale. I really, after working with the state government and speaking to more moderate Republicans whose votes we'd need, and looking at just the Trump presidency and the dangerousness of the Trump presidency, I just truly did believe, I am one of those people that believed that Biden had a better chance of taking Wisconsin in that election. And so again, it's nothing against Bernie, but I understand that answer could be a disappointment, but I really, just really wanted to ensure that that Trump, that we're going to win in November. And I hope Biden picks more progressive VP, and so that ticket is a little bit more balanced.
Yep, definitely. Thank you. So number 12, what's your analysis of the Evers administration's handling of the COVID-19 crisis in Wisconsin, including its handling of the processes leading up to the April 7th election, and then same thing for the state legislature?
Yeah. So just full disclosure here, when I was working with the state of Wisconsin and working with the Department of Health Services, I was working with them up until December. These are some of my former colleagues who were pushing forward the COVID-19 response initially, and they still are. So one, I have to say, I know the folks who work within that administration, especially the subject matter experts within our Department of Public Health. And I think initially what the administration tried to do was great, right? The communication going out to the public of ensuring stay-at-home orders and everything like that, to keep our population as safe as possible was again really great to see. Now, here's though where my criticism takes place of the current administration. Is what we ended up seeing was that because of the administration's ability or because they could not work together with the Republicans, and because no one's getting along, we were seeing really bad policy making and fighting, right? Where these court cases got to the Supreme Court. And where I was disappointed is that, I think at the end of the day, what we have to do as state legislators and also the administration too is find a way to work with the other side. I think the reason you're seeing all of this mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis, where now, the governor essentially doesn't have any power, right, to put in a stay-at-home order, is because of the lack of relationships and the lack of the ability for people to work together. So what I would have just wanted to see more is both sides coming together. I think there's blame to go around to both sides. And of course, I was very disappointed in the legislature, and still am, for not passing effective legislation and not passing it currently to really face the COVID-19 crisis head on. So again, I would just like to see that we put people above politics right now, because if there was ever a time to do that, it doesn't matter what our political party or affiliation should be in this moment. So that's what I'd like to see. I just would like to see people to stop name calling each other, and instead, be forced to not sit in a room, maybe a virtual room, and it can be over once there's a solution figured out.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the next question, 13 and 14, I will say are related, but they're actually not the same question. So I'll just ask them separately here. So the first question is, are you supportive of the BDS, so boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement?
Yes, certainly. I believe that in address to the relationships with Palestine and Israel, I believe fully in holding Israel accountable, or putting pressure on Israel to follow international law. And so I'm in support of being innovative with the ways pressure can be put on Israel right now. So I'm supportive of the movement, and so a little bit more background about me. I was actually working in international education for a number of years and was an international student advisor at Georgetown University, and really believe strongly too in just international relations and diplomacy, and so and advocacy for human rights across the board. So I'm supportive of this movement and what folks are trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you. And then sort of taking it a little bit broader. So do you believe that protesting is a form of speech, and therefore the right to do so, including BDS and anti-pipeline movements, should not be punished?
Yes. I mean, my short answer is yes. I'm sure are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, if people are participating in protests or boycotts or anything of that nature, I do believe that is freedom of speech. If you look at, for example, the anti-pipeline movement, the truth is, it can be extremely effective too, to wake people up, to generate awareness. If you look at the Dakota Access Pipeline, I mean, look at the news that came out today. A court just ruled that the pipeline has to shut down for an environmental protection review. And I don't know if we can say that would have happened without that type of movement that took place. So I think it can be very effective. I'm a communications professional and believe that sometimes you have to do it this way to get attention and to get public awareness, because public awareness is what leads to eventual action. So I do not people should be getting arrested for those actions. Again, as long as it's in a peaceful manner. But yeah, so today's news was really great.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, list the unions that have already endorsed you in this race. Which labor endorsements are you seeking?
Sure. So currently I do not have any endorsements of any of the unions. To be honest, one thing and you're going to learn a little bit more as we go down the line here, that as a first-time candidate have not been able to actively pursue all of the endorsements just because of time in the day. Have been trying to build my team and do voter outreach. However, one union that I am actively pursuing is MTI, and so hope that could come through, and would certainly be pursuing others as well, and open to talking to all the unions, believe in workers' rights, and would like to restore the rights that were taken away from Act 10. So yeah, but would love them, and we'll do my absolute best, but that's been a little bit harder to do given I'm kind of an outsider right now.
Definitely. Thank you. So the next one is a little bit of a big question. I'm gonna make sure it's in the chat as well. So regarding fundraising, I'll just ask all the questions at once. Regarding fundraising, how much have you raised for this race to date? Who are your top 3 donors? What percentage of your total is from these top donors? And then how much of it is strictly from small individual donors, less than 50? And then this is your first election, so yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for that question. So I was actually just checking my latest document that I had. So as far as current fundraising efforts, we've raised about $7,400 to date. As far as the top 3 donors, I am proud to say family members who have, with the state assembly election, our max contribution is $1,000. And so, have been relying heavily on my network, family and friends. So that is the majority of where my donations are coming from. They're at this point all individual donors. I wouldn't say all are less than 50, but it kind of completely spans. So have received some $5 donations, and then across the spectrum. So have been just really appreciative, but have not received any organizational donations at this point. Yeah, did that fully answer that question? I think I did.
Yeah, I believe so.
Great. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here.
Yeah, so great, thank you. So the next question is, do you support the legalization of recreational cannabis, including the expungement of all previous cannabis-related charges and the release of all those currently serving time for such charges?
Yes, fully supportive of legalizing recreational marijuana, and also, legalizing medical marijuana as well. I think one thing with this, and especially with the criminal legal system, is that we have to decriminalize marijuana immediately. That would be one thing that I would fight for as soon as possible, because we know the impact this has on communities of color. And as far as the expungement of cases or charges, would be in full support of that as well. So, would really want to see this get through, because we just cannot be putting people in prison for these types of offenses.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And so the final question here, since they're a technical one, number 18, do you have paid staff or consultants working on your campaign? And then what percentage of your campaign funding goes to paid staff or consultants, if so?
Sure. So again, this is a very grassroots effort. I have a small team of volunteers, and also 3 individual, or actually, I take that back, about a handful of individuals who are receiving some type of compensation to help me throughout the summer, all within the Madison area. And, again, it's, so no one is actually full-time, and just having that kind of help from people who are really passionate about the issues that I talk about and about this run. So it's really exciting to kind of have that type of team to work with. So feel extremely, extremely fortunate. for it. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, answering all the questions. Well, yeah.
No, I was going to say, no, Peter, Ashley, thank you both. And thank you for your work with your organization. You know, it was really, I was really excited to receive the message from you, Peter, that you guys were doing this, and good luck. I know it's the first time too that you're doing the endorsements. So I really, yeah, commend you guys for that, because it's a big deal for any of us to have your backing. So.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us.